Thank you. Um, I didn't prepare anything this week because I thought, why would I write all this down? I've experienced it. Um, I will start at the beginning of my life, but I've worked through some things even since the last time I gave my testimony in Revelation. I had a confusing childhood. I had a relatively loving childhood, but it was confusing. My parents married and in the early 60s, and my mom went on to be saved during the Jesus Revolution, and my father remained an atheist. Um, he was an alcoholic and an atheist, and she went on to become a missionary. She traveled the world taking care of everybody else's kids and meeting their needs and introducing them to Jesus, and I was left home with the alcoholic atheist. Now, that is confusing. And it's even more confusing now as an adult to look back and be like, how could she have just done that? It's a thing. Um, Dad would take me to St. Elizabeth's because that's where my mom's parents went. I love St. Elizabeth's. I went to parochial school. I went through catechism. I did the things. It was a place where I was accepted, and it was a good experience for 4 years during the time that I spent there in school. But again, it was confusing not having my mother, my dad dropping me off at kindergarten classes and I'm kicking beer cans out from the floorboard. At some point, my mom decided that that wasn't fulfilling for her. Being a missionary, she needed something else, and she decided to go back and get another degree. And she was going to college, and she met a foreign exchange student, and she began having an affair, and my parents divorced at that point. Um, that was a very hard time. That divorce happened 3 days before my eighth birthday, and we were told that my grandmother, who took care of me while mom was away, was diagnosed with fourth stage lung cancer that following month, just after the new year. So things are very unsettled in my life, always have always been kind of confusing and unsettled. When we moved away from my hometown in Illinois and moved to Indiana, mom was continuing her education. She had then married this foreign exchange student. And when she felt as though she was kind of being, I don't know, I guess the word she manipulated is probably the word that she would use. He was a little forceful. He was doing some pretty crazy things. And she tried to divorce him, and he would refuse it. He continuously refused it. He tried to kidnap me in fifth grade. So, and ironically, my dad knew that this nonsense was going on, even though she had never disclosed that she was married. He said, if anything ever happens to you, here's a duffel bag. He sets this duffel bag down. And he says, I have cut out the bottom and put Velcro on these sides of it. Here is an envelope, one with money and keys, and the other one with a letter. If you're ever taken somewhere and you need to pack a bag and you've not said goodbye to me, you're not supposed to be going anywhere. Man had some foresight. It's pretty crazy. So, um, I was basically told if I'm ever taken anywhere if I get to an airport, I'm supposed to tell somebody that my name is Anne Marie, which is my cousin's name, and I need to call David and Sherry, who are my aunt and uncle, because my aunt is kidnapping me. It was a lot of drama for, a 10-year-old. Um, Not a lot of church going on there at that time. Mom was kind of running wild. And it was such a crazy experience. Finally, my dad has been fighting for custody to take me back, and all of these things, all this family drama the entire time. Nobody is saying nothing is rooted in faith, nothing at all. My mother, the missionary, working on her theology degree, nothing was rooted in faith. Nothing was about prayer. Nothing was about Jesus will help us or protect us or anything like that. Um, and living in a community where it's a college town, you are learning about so many different cultures and different people and people that are accepting. And that I've really been thinking about that over the last probably 6 weeks, 6 or 8 weeks. Where did I discover New Age? When did that come into my life? What when did I start like thinking that Buddhism and Tao, all these things, when did that fit into my puzzle? And it was about that time, fifth or sixth grade, living in a community full of all of these people from different countries, all these different nationalities and backgrounds, and befriending them and their children, because they go to school with you. So that's when it really all began. My mom and my dad never spoke bad about one another. They were never abusive with their language or anything like that. And it was always kind of confusing. Why aren't you together? What happened? What's going on here? They still are very good friends. We have Christmases together every year with all of our grandchildren. It's a very bizarre situation, but it's good. It's good that they can be adults. A lot of people don't a lot of children of divorced parents don't have adult parents. So it's good. But when my mother remarried again, um, that's when things in our lives really started to settle down and feel better, content, peaceful. My stepdad, um, the man that walked me down the aisle at my wedding, um, he was a pastor. And he wasn't one of those scary pastors in the Pentecostal church that talks about fire and brimstone and all kinds of craziness and people running around and all. It's just a party. They were fun and exciting, but he wasn't about the fear. He really explained grace and what all that meant and what Jesus was really all about. And, you know, religion is about rules and Jesus is about a relationship. That's where I learned that. Um, I was 13. Going into adulthood, I tried as much as I could to really kind of stay in line with what they were teaching me, my mom and my stepdad, all the while having totally confusing feelings about my mom, how she could have literally abandoned me. I felt abandoned my entire childhood, felt abandoned by her, emotionally neglected, um, for her to go and serve this God. That's annoying to me that could have steered me away, and it did for a long time. Like this feeling like he's more important, and he should be more important, but still as a little kid, you kind of want your mom. um Once I got to later high school age, I got pregnant when I was in high school. I was a senior. I was a you know uh varsity co-captain on the cheerleading team and all of these things, and I ended up pregnant with my daughter Avery, and that was okay. um that experience taught me a lot about myself and what selfishness is and isn't, and I grew up really quickly. I moved out the day after my 18th birthday, and I was married to her father. We were together, high school sweethearts or whatever, for 8 years. And he picked up a drinking problem, a lot like my dad. He was in a car accident and crippled his best friend and basically abandoned him in a field in the middle of the night and left him there to die. And That was terrifying. The sheriff shows up at the back door and says, "Ma'am, is your husband home?" "Yes." And they basically just arrested him right then and there because he had abandoned this man who tried to drown himself in a mud puddle in a storm. He still has no use of his legs, and we are friends to this day. He's a very forgiving man, and he's forgiven my ex-husband. But at that point, I wasn't willing to forgive him. I couldn't believe that you would leave your best friend from kindergarten in a field. I'm just me. How would you ever treat me if something came push come to shove? So we separated after that. His drinking, that was not a wake up call for him in regard to his drinking problem. So I went on and I moved on, and I went into bad relationship after bad relationship after bad relationship. Totally dragging my daughter around all over God's green earth, which is just as neglectful as my mother was with me. And I didn't ever connect those dots until the last couple of years. At one point, she's about 8 or 9 years old. I have just been a total chaotic mess, totally relying on myself the entire way, and just so self-righteous. I can do it. I can get it. My boss babe mode was really in high gear. And I did. I got things done, but I wasn't satisfying her needs. I wasn't meeting her needs as a mother. And I ended up having a one night stand with a man, and I got pregnant with my son. He's a gift. He is a gift. But his father is a pathological narcissist, and literally a pathological narcissist and a maniac. I didn't want to be in a relationship with him. Sometimes I wonder if I ever should have told him that I was pregnant. He would never know. But he's haunted us still to this day. But after I had my son, saying we couldn't really shake him, he would break into our house. He would puncture the tires on my car. He broke into my house one time and broke every glass item in my home, every window, every plate, the glass front of my stove, because I wouldn't fall under his control and be under his thumb. He wanted this thing, this commitment, and he was a perfect stranger to me, and I just wasn't interested in it. He beat me. He would break in my home and he would beat me. It was awful. But in the end, he came to our back door one night. I had had a blind date. It was the first date I'd been on in, 13 months or something. Then it was just to like a 4th of July party, like a cookout with fireworks. It wasn't some big extravagant anything. But he came, he heard rumor, through the grapevine, Susan's on a date, blah, blah, blah. He came to my house and I wouldn't let him in the house. He had no business being there. He was raging jealous. He too is an alcoholic. And he shot at me. He shot at me through my back door. He missed my femoral artery by about 3 inches. And in that moment, when he said, "F it then, bitch," and pulled this gun out of his back waistband and pointed straight at me. And I don't know how that didn't come straight at me like he aimed, but it went sideways closer to the opening of the door, where the latch is. And It missed my leg. Everything's just completely went, whoa. It was this noise, just everything. Like, everybody was talking. It sounded like Charlie Brown's teacher. And it was slow motion, like frozen molasses, like I was running through frozen molasses. And somehow I had the ability to not look at what I was doing, but I leapt up and back 4 stairs, completely out of harm's way, and landed on my feet. It just happened. I don't I don't think basketball players can leap that high. It was totally supernatural. It was not me. It was not my ability. It was unbelievable. And he broke into my house with a chair after he had shot through the door. He broke in the door with a chair, busted out the glass, and proceeded to run my head into my friend's head. And he beat both of us. He was beating up the both of us, and he had no business being there. And it was all about control. And control definitely is witchcraft. I don't know. Anybody that desires control that deeply, it's culty. That behavior from him is so self-righteous. He was cruel and evil. And that moment, that near-death experience, all kinds of people have near-death experiences, but I truly understood that that was a supernatural presence that I didn't even have the forethought to call upon. But it protected me in that moment because I was baptized when I was 6 years old. And I believed then that I was filled with the Spirit, this supernatural spirit. And I wanted to learn who that spirit was after that day. I wanted to learn more about who would come to protect me when I didn't call upon it or them or whatever it is. I wanted to know joy. I wanted peace. I wanted a complete overhaul. I wanted a complete overhaul. And I thought anything that can supernaturally lift my body 12 feet up in the air at an angle, they can work me over a good one. And that's my takeaway from at that moment, at that point, up to that point. That's my takeaway in life. I was willing to submit at times, but never enough to change. And that was my moment. I wanted to submit to the point of change that day, July 8th, 2013. And there's so much more after that point. But that was my life. That was when he saved my life. That's when the Spirit saved my life. And that's when I knew this is the God I need to be serving. And that's my journey.